Halli Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. On this episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, it's the Democratic Party debates. It's always Swalwell to enter a new presidential campaign season, and we've officially entered the 2020 race for the White House. The first debates now, one for the history books. Join me and my partner in politics, veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper, when we handicap the debates on this week's installment of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The podcast posted at hallicasserjayne.com. It's Halli and Matt time. Here we go. All right, Mr. Matthew Cooper.
Hey there.
We had two harrowing, I hate that word, days. Oh boy, my nerves were just a wreck. I'm not good at debates. Debates freak me out.
Debates are not great.
They're really
Debates are not great.
But they are important. And many things happened in the last 48 hours that are well worth our conversation. So here, buddy, we go. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Let's begin with first your overall take.
Well, it is a frustrating format, I will say, with that many candidates, that many moderators, that distracting set. It is not a pleasant viewer experience. So that is, I would sort of start there. In a way, I think it's kind of diminishing to everyone. In terms of their individual performances, I guess I would probably share what's emerged as the kind of conventional wisdom, which is that, Kamala Harris really had a strong, just kind of theatrical performance, in the second debate, and that, Cory Booker had a pretty good one in the first debate. I think in terms of the intra-party politics, I'd share that, but we can discuss more what kind of the longer term prospects are for the 20.
Yeah.
We need a clever name, I don't know, for the 20.
Here's what I could tell you. I first of all, I mostly agree with you, with a few exceptions, but I mostly agree with you on the set design, which drove me insane. It was ridiculous. It was just so over the top, and it was distracting, actually. And those things count. And NBC by the way, had some trouble with the audio and with video. And
I mean, look, these things are hard to pull off, but in general, it was, I think, sort of just as a viewer, it was kind of a frustrating experience. But I guess you and I are somewhat biased because we've seen, we're kind of what they call high information voters. We've seen these guys before. If you had never seen them before, maybe it was or many of them, it was kind of different experience.
I was trying to look at it from that, and get out of the, I'm in the thick of it to, what are they all thinking? I have a friend who I'm going to be using as a kind of a bellwether, who is one of those low information voters, into it, willing to watch it to some degree. And it was, I'll share as we go along the way what some of the things, she won't let me use her name, by the way, but I really, really want to. But she had a very interesting take on it. And I think she's the mainstream voter these days, particularly in Central Florida. All of that said, can we say that Trump played a very little part in all of this, even on the second night? And that was surprising to me.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got this kind of, giant figure who has so galvanized Democrats, and who they are also determined to get rid of. And yet he was sort of not really present that much.
It was surprising. I mean, why not?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really get that part of it. I thought it all would have been sort of about him.
Well, there you go. You never know what's going to happen next. I'm going to go right to Kamala Harris. Then we'll go back and look at some of the other people who were on the stage both nights. But I wanted to talk about her because, as you said, the meme now is she was at her breakout moment. Oh my gosh, I'm going to tell you, I was shaking after her attack on Biden. And I may be different than everybody else. It left me feeling icky. to me, it just stank. First of all, I don't see anybody's rationale, Matt, in attacking Biden for that comment that he made that was the opening for all of this, going after him. And even though Kamala said he's not a racist, she was calling him a racist.
Yes, that was what we call damning with faint praise.
Yes, and so I have to
Halli, I don't think you're Nazi. But I will say I felt very hurt.
I mean, all right. So can we look at this on the one thing, which is, if anybody thought that she was running to be vice president, you now know she's in it for the long haul. And it'll be really interesting if Biden was to survive all of this and become the candidate, whether or not he could ever choose her to be his vice president.
Yeah, people have overcome bigger before. But
right.
yeah.
But it is there. So let's put that in the mix.
There's no love there. Yeah.
But you, as a student of history, will certainly explain to the listeners that she was not even correct in her discussion of busing. Would you give us some background, please?
Sure. Well, let me just start with the moment, because I think this is what captivated kind of the pundit class and perhaps the viewers too, which is that, remember, it was Mayor Pete was getting a question about cops in South Bend.
Right.
And she did manage to kind of come in, steal the ball, and then turn it into a direct, attack on Biden. So just kind of, in a debate that diminishes everyone, it really stood out just as an aesthetically moment. Now, you're right. First of all, busing was a kind of a blunderbuss tool to overcome the legacy of discrimination. That really is it was sort of a time warp, right? I mean, this has not been a kind of a policy issue on the forefront of American life the way it was 44 years ago when it, tore Boston and apart and was divisive in many American cities. It was not popular. It met with a lot of resistance. In some places it worked, in a lot of places it didn't. And she did, kind of mischaracterize Biden's position in a bunch of ways. That said, I mean, he was not
nimble.
He was not nimble. Yeah. I mean, Biden's position is a little confused over the years because it seemed he was clearly uncomfortable with busing. I mean, it was a big issue in Delaware, in terms of desegregating the schools in Wilmington, the state's largest city, which was majority black and a heavily black school district. And they were trying different things across boundaries to try to desegregate the schools, and it was not popular. It was very unpopular with the whites. It was only modestly popular with African Americans. And Biden's positions in the Senate kind of reflected that, and he did work with some former segregationists on some of the issues related to busing. But in general, her implication that he was a super ally of segregationists or that he opposed busing entirely were at best exaggerated. Mm-hmm. So that's I think what you were getting at when you asked me the question. Right. Okay, so it wasn't entirely fair. Plus the, I don't think you're a racist question was, incredibly insulting, given history and such. But it's very powerful coming from an African-American woman. And to be fair, Biden brought this upon himself in an effort to, to tout his capacity to work with people with whom he disagrees. He cited sort of the most odious people he ever worked with. James Eastland was kind of the worst of the worst when Biden got to the Senate. Okay, so all that said, then, well, what was your take on Biden's response? I
actually felt sorry for him because I actually think that I saw in his face "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah. I felt some of that. Yeah, absolutely.
How outrageous. I don't even know how to respond to something like this. How low can you go? I mean, Matt, I'm going to say something, and it's controversial, but I think it's something that's going to have to be discussed as we go along if this all continues within the Democratic Party, and that is that there is a certain reverse racism going on here among the young ones. I'm going to put Kamala in that category for the moment. If you listen to the left-wing, young, pundit black class. I think I mentioned this last week when we talked, but sure. It's worse now. And the black pundits, period. There's a rewriting a history here. Let me say that if it weren't for men like Biden, Harris wouldn't have been on that stage last night. Whether you like the way it arrived, he was one of the people who said, "Wait a minute, we got to fix some of this. It's not going to be an easy thing to do." It's kind of like this, what we're going on. How do you fix the immigration problem? How do you get from A to Z? How do you fix the healthcare problem? How do you get from A to Z? It's never a perfect, you go from A, B, C, D, and it's all wonderful and beautiful and terrific. There are mistakes made along the way. But the fact of the matter is, that generation had a huge amount of the reason why all these, there were black candidates on the stage. So that annoys me. And having grown up in that era, by the way, I grew up in Englewood, New Jersey. You're from Maplewood, I guess, originally. But there was busing in my town that just shook the town to pieces. And there was a great white, migration from public schools at that point, including me. Cause it didn't work. It just did not work. It was creating, lower education, schools, a lot of, fighting, rough areas, yada, yada, yada. That said, I just have to go back to, you have to look at history in historical terms, not in modern terms. And I think this is dangerous for the Democratic Party, quite frankly. I mean, it opens up a whole line for Trump, playing to conversations about this, and what the hell is happening to the Democratic Party.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, I think, I think it's a revisionist view of busing at the moment to suggest that it was, widely accepted as a good solution to
right.
The legacy of racism. I mean, it wasn't popular. There's a reason it's been off the radar for so long. I think it had some more successes than its critics would allow. But in general, it was, I think, not good. And in some places so spectacularly bad, like Boston, that to sort of, kind of whitewash it, to use a bad phrase, is kind of unfortunate. So I agree with you. I mean, I felt a certain sympathy for Biden. I think he wasn't Martin Luther King. He was a kind of pragmatic liberal and a politician of the time who navigated some tough issues. But, for the most part, has obviously been pro civil rights and was an incredibly loyal viceroy to Barack Obama, which is why he's, polling so high among African Americans. So, he's got, you had to feel a little of his, umbrage.
Yeah.
Sure.
Good word.
But, okay, he's a big boy. He's got big boy pants. This attack was clearly coming. And his response was clearly inadequate to the moment. It was not good at kind of explaining who he was. He didn't have a good way of kind of talking her down. He just froze. I mean, I don't think it was disastrous. I don't think it was as bad as a lot of critics are putting it. And
because the sympathy factor is in there.
I think there was a certain sympathy factor, and he wasn't, crazy in his response. I mean, he didn't blow up, and he didn't cower, and look, it wasn't it was pretty bad response, but especially because this was so easily anticipated.
So let's go there for a second. Can we go to the easily, the fact that it should have been anticipated and what wasn't?
Yeah.
It's because I mentioned last week that I'm not crazy about some of the people who are running his campaign, and I think this really proves that they're not doing their jobs. They leaked again last night saying that, he was prepared for this. He didn't give the answers that we prepped him to give. I don't buy that in the least. That's a failing on their part, and he needs to say, wait a second, I don't think I have the crew in charge. Who needs to be in charge here? Because
the problem. I mean, look, it's their.
If they can't keep him in tow, is my point, then they're not the right people for the job.
I think it's his responsibility to keep himself in tow ultimately. But I think the bigger problem is you've got a staff that's leaking stuff that makes him look like a dotard and or a dotard. And look, that doesn't serve him well. I mean, now at this point, the worst thing they could do is panic. I think.
Well, they can't really replace anything because the minute that they do that, they look like they're passing.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should.
But they can bring other people in.
They could bring other people in and quietly ease some out.
Right.
But he's ultimately he's got to carry this himself, and so.
Did you think that
look?
he was
I mean,
old?
I think in the end, this. Look, she had a good moment that is clearly, sort of helpful to her presidential bid. In the long run, I think you and I agree that, like, an issue like busing is an incredible gift to Donald Trump.
Right. Well, a lot of the issues that these dudes are bringing up in this thing are a couple of things that I want to clean up with, and that was this was so planned. She had a photograph, an adorable photograph of her back in the day. That went up on Twitter within seconds of her statement. So, and maybe even a few seconds before. So, I want to make clear to everybody how planned this was. And she was just looking for the opportunity to do what she did. And I want to go back to just briefly, this schism that I think, could become very rupture, the goodwill within the left and the right of and the moderates of the Democratic Party. And that's this thing that, the blacks are playing. Expressing a hate on for white folks because.
Well, let's not say the blacks. I think
why? I think that there is that there.
But who are you referring to? You're referring to the candidates? Or you're referring to the pundit class?
This word pundit, we got to be careful for, because if you look to see what's going on and who they're putting out there.
You're talking about people, like younger African American commentators on cable.
Yes. That's who I'm speaking to.
Well, that's okay. Well, that's different than the blacks.
Well, it's not all blacks, of course.
Obviously not, since they're elevating Biden's candidacy.
Okay,
right.
For sure. But I want to make clear what's been going on. And I have been telling you, this is something I keep bringing up on the show, which is, you see that they have no patience for having the old white guy be the face of the Democratic Party in 2020. And, I've been talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's only getting uglier. And I don't think it's smart for the Dem leadership to let this go too far, because it is a silver platter to Trump.
Yeah, I don't know if the Dem leadership has the capacity to sort of, control
I'm talking about the Democratic National Committee, because I think they had some control of how the first night of the thing was going on, where it was clear that there had been a thing that we're not going to beat up on each other heavily, and I think that they told the second night crowd have at it, because it was too clean the first night.
I don't know whether that happened organically or not.
I can't imagine that happened organically.
But
I think that was just the way it was told. All right, we spent enough time on that.
Okay.
Let's move on to the first night in general. And I just want to say something. Elizabeth Warren, remember her?
Yeah.
It's like, hello? She was wiped out in the last 24 hours. It's like nobody's mentioned the name Elizabeth Warren. That first night, how did you think? And we can't do them all, but I think it's important to talk about Warren, since, she's high up there on the list. What was your overall take of Ms. Warren?
Well, look, she's had a good rise lately, and I think for good reason. She kind of captures the id of, where the party is right now, and she's got a very coherent worldview, which is, it's just a powerful thing instead of just being a kind of list of issues. She's got kind of a coherent and detailed vision of how she sees the world working. So, I think that all helps her, and she's pretty spry in these debates. So, I think she continues to, take supporters from Bernie Sanders. I thought Booker popped, and I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago, he's undervalued here, and I think he showed his skills as a politician. I mean, he can run hot sometimes. Television is what's famously called a cool medium, and he can run a little hot. But he did well distinguish himself, as did Castro. But again, I think we're back to what you and I would identify as the problems, is that the issues that they're lingering on are, in the long run, I think, going to be gifts to Trump, whether it's eliminating private health insurance that so many the Democrats seem to support, whether it's basically removing all barriers to entry to the country illegally.
Right.
I mean, when they're all getting to the left of Beto, who wants to take down the wall in El Paso, they're getting to a place where I don't think voters are, and
I think
they're digging themselves deeper, and those who are sort of questioning that, whether it's kind of Delaney or to a lesser extent Klobuchar and some of the others, they're clearly the action is not with those more moderate members. And,
I agree with that for sure, and I think that you raised the point because there's the primary lane and the general election lane, and these guys are in a primary lane with little thought about what happens in the general election, and you can't clean it up. I thought it was interesting this morning that Harris, who had raised her hand to that question about eliminating insurance, private insurance, this morning said she had misunderstood the question, and no, she would not. So
yeah, that's a very dubious explanation. Like, did you really think the question is that it was only aimed at the people up there who are currently on government insurance?
Right.
I mean, it was a weird.
For sure.
It was, I think, a weird cleanup act the next morning.
But look, at least she tried, because clearly that is not something she needed on her resume, going up against Trump. So she's
it's also, can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
They're not only getting in sort of promoting a bad set of issues that could reelect Trump, they're all things that will never happen. They're not going to. President Sanders, if that happens, or President Warren, will never eliminate all private health insurance.
Right. They can't.
They can't. There's no support. It won't happen. They're also not going to be reparations for slavery.
Right.
There's not going to be a return to busing.
Right.
I mean, they're taking on these causes which really are not going to happen, even if they win.
But so they feel, though, that obviously that's the way a lot of these people are thinking. I mean, this is what they think. This is what they want. This is the world that they perceive. Or they think that their voters want that world created, which is really rather extraordinary. Because it's exactly what the Republicans, why Donald Trump won. Because people said, what are you all talking about over there? That's not really the issue here. Help. We need money. We need jobs. We need you to bring. The Dems have the extraordinary ability, and you can see it, after the 2 nights of the debates, of shooting themselves in the foot after they shoot each other. Just the way it is. They're in a weird place, and I think they have a pretty good hand to play in this election. They do if they play it.
Yeah, and they don't, and they had a good model in the 2018 midterms.
And if they play it again, but they seem not to want to do this.
The
other thing that I just quickly say, because before my little brain forgets, because I got a lot of facts in my brain after these last 2 days. The other thing that wasn't impeachment, Nadaway.
That is true. That's true. There was no real impeachment talk.
Not a whisper. I'm astonished about that. And I bring that up also in terms of Marianne Williamson. Now, let me talk about Marianne Williamson for a moment.
Yes.
Who I've had on the show many, many times, and I consider her a
right.
friend.
No, I would love to hear more about
she is quite
your take on her.
She's an extraordinary woman. She's been, I've known her for, longer than maybe you've been alive. No, I'm kidding. I've known her for years and years and years and years and years. And she is quite brilliant. And, she is very much a spiritualist, person. And, she was involved in movements before movements were even a thought. She considers to focus on the spiritual aspects of life, and I think that she has a. I was happy that she was up on that stage for the fact that she's able to bring that back into the conversation. The eyes in which she looks at what's going on are different than yours and my eyes and many other people's eyes, because she does look at it from almost guru status, if you will. Not that she's a guru, but you know what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying.
A Dalai Lama of American politics, if you will. And I think that's an important voice to bring into it. Now, she went off the rails a little bit because she's not a professional debater when she was talking about Australia or whatever. But she did bring up some really good points about how our medicine works in this country that nobody else wants to, acknowledge, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it was important to have her there. Okay, now, Marianne, take it, run with it, write a book about our politics in this, and all of you people on the left and the right sides of these debates, you need to go so that we can start focusing on where we need to go. That's my thoughts on Marianne. We absolutely must bring a spiritual element back into how we perceive our politics, because without it, we'll have Donald Trump forever. If not this Donald Trump, another one. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with the spirituality part. I just thought her, and I think she made a good point about Trump's kind of emotional connection to voters, and that it's not all about, what policy plans you have. Mm-hmm. But, that said, she had some more sort of incoherent moments about.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Befitting someone who has not spent a life in politics.
She did very well, considering she did not spend her life in politics.
There's no question. Look, she clearly got some attention,
right.
she's there's no reason for her to get out. Yang, if you think about Yang, it was the other
without
kind of super outsider, kind of no lasting impact. So.
Yeah, without its tie. I thought that was outrageous.
And without a tie. Yeah, he went with the tech executive.
Yeah, I didn't think that was good. But, I've listened to him in other forums, and he's not an idiot by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
He didn't get to
he's bad on circumcision, but yeah.
Ouch.
Ouch.
Sorry, but ouch. But yeah, I listen, these guys, they each bring something to the table. You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device too. Just say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. Well, I want to go back to Booker because this friend of mine who was kind of my bellwether for all of this was actually very taken with him. Okay. I thought that was the first person that she came back to me with was, he had a lot of good, she liked Tulsi Gabbard as well, however, so go figure.
Well, that's okay.
But I want to go back to, see, Booker doesn't do it for me. He just doesn't.
Right.
And I can't figure out, there's a sincerity lacking in him to me. He seems very political and message oriented, and not necessarily a great orator. Maybe that works for people because simplistic language may be more, to people's, comprehension. I don't know. But I always think of him as a lightweight. I don't know what your thoughts are there, but I never see him as deep and depthful and presidential and strong.
Well, look, I think he has a very impressive story about what he took on in Newark.
Sure.
He took on a lot, and he stuck with it for years until he won. And what he's done has been impressive there. I'd say he's probably less impressive as a senator than he was as a mayor.
A community activist is what he really was as mayor.
Well, he got elected to the city. Yeah, but he took on an extremely corrupt and menacing regime at some cost to his, personal safety and other things. And I think it's a very impressive story. If you have a chance to see the documentary Street Fight about what he
Oh, listen, I know him well. My dad was born and raised in Newark. My family.
Yeah, and I'm from that corner of the world. So
we understand that. Sure,
look,
I'm not underselling that. Yeah, I'm not.
I think the mayoral story was very impressive. I think the senatorial story is less so, and of course the background as a Rhodes Scholar is impressive, and football star and all those things. Not star, but very solid player in a very big conference. Look, I think to his credit, he's presented a more sort of optimistic vision of the world than kind of Warren and others. I think he is kind of a moderate on some of these economic things, but look, in general, he's super woke, and look, I think he's gonna be a more formidable contender than people have thought over the last 6 months.
Well, he could be.
We'll see. Now, Gabbard.
Did you hear me? I said could be.
Could be. You did the could be. I'm sorry. I didn't give it enough. We need some music to play.
I'm going to get that and start putting that in there.
I thought Gabbard really benefited from having a hypnotist. Because, whoa.
God. What can you say to that? I can't top you.
I mean,
Good God.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. You got anything
but,
more? Yeah.
No, look, she popped, and I think she talked about her military record and tied it to pulling out troops in an effective way. I don't think it's going anywhere in the long run.
No, but she was another one who popped up. A lot of people
had a little pop up as did Castro.
A lot of people were looking her up on Google. And as I said, my friend thought she was great. But you know what? All you got to say is the military, and there's a certain segment of society that just goes, oh yeah.
I mean, there was no other. We've only had one veteran per panel so far, and
so that brings you.
Pops now, what about Mayor Pete? Going back to debate 2?
Well, I listen. I'm always impressed by him because I think he is real. He's very real. He's very honest. I mean, or at least he comes off as being sincere. He doesn't have a problem with saying, it's my failure, this, that, or the other thing. And I think that's really great. He's going nowhere. He's limited because he's never going to get the black vote. And, but I think he's a wonderful voice to have in the mix. And I think, at some point, you have to see what, I don't think he gets, goes off into the sunset if he doesn't make it to the top tier.
No.
But I do think that you have to put him in his perspective, which is, he comes in, without much of a chance of getting too far in all of it. And yet, look, he's had a terrific, already, contribution to the conversation. So I do like him. I want to talk about Beto.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the first time that I saw him in a clip when he was running for the Senate in Texas, and he was very good at that. And it astonishes me how he went from being so good at that to being so inept in this arena. Because it really is astonishing. Now, what he did the other night, maybe you noticed, was, all that high energy.
Yeah.
Where that was what when you're out in a field and there are 15,000 people around you, that's a really wonderful energy to have. On a small stage with the camera coming in on tight on you, no, it doesn't work. Well, he did that the first time I think he was out on that TV camera, but now he's learned to, suppress that, overarching energy. And what's left isn't much because there's no substance. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess they showed that widespread belief that he did not do well and that there was something. It was kind of low energy to coin a phrase, and it was substantively it was not great performance, and he has kind of an odd way of organizing his thoughts.
Yes, yes.
In terms of like generality, anecdote.
But he always starts with the anecdote, which I never like, even when presidents do it at State of the Unions. It may make me sick.
You have a low threshold for sick. Nauseated by anecdotes, but I know what you mean. No, I mean, clearly, and, I think he was right with Castro. I mean, about, whether you preserve some kind of criminal penalty for someone entering the country illegally. But I think in a way he's been swept up in the progressive conundrum because he's not super lefty, and I think a lot of people wanted him to be. Yeah.
Or assumed he was because of the way.
Or assumed he was, and because he was running. And look, he was running against Voldemort. I mean, there's probably after Trump, Cruz is probably the most galvanizing figure in the Democratic Party, and so. Look, he had and it looked like he might flip Texas, and there was kind of an exciting mission, and there was no other progressive. Now he's up there with, 25 other, Democrats, and it's
interesting to see how being an activist, which is basically how he was running that original campaign in Texas, does not necessarily translate to the national arena.
No, and
I find that interesting.
And he got too flaky with the dental appointment.
For sure. But that's the difference between that's what they want in those smaller campaigns.
But remember, his problem started because the woke crowd.
That woke word makes me nuts too. So I'm ill and nuts. Go ahead.
But they remember how upset they were that he sort of like thanked his wife for taking care of the kids.
Oh my God.
Which was just, come on, A, it's true. And B, it was clearly not meant to be demeaning. And yet that became, he had to apologize. He had to grovel after.
Yeah. Just remember this, Mr. Matthew. They're having less sex in this generation than in any generation since they've been keeping track of young people having sex. So that somehow translates into the woke thing and the, and mommies and children.
Yeah, well, of course, because everything is like navigating, everything is campus politics. No wonder they're not having sex.
Right. In the interest of time, can we move on? I want to, because there are a couple of people I still
keep it going. Keep it moving here.
Amy Klobuchar cannot get her moment, and that bugs me. This is a smart, middle of the road, thank God, person. Now, I think the real thing here is this is a woman who's meant for the Senate or in a cabinet position, if you will, and not necessarily for the presidency. That said, she isn't, she just, here's where I wanted to go. I think that when I was watching the first night, I was more interested in how they appeared and how their telegenics was working more than I was on policy. The policy certainly was in the back of my head, obviously, because we've had conversations about where they all are on their policy. But I really wanted to see how these people were looking, from the viewer who is not thinking like you and I are coming from. And she does have a problem, and the other person who has that problem, believe it or not, is another female, and that's Kirsten Gillibrand. And it's a voice issue. Now, all right, I do audio, so I'm into voices. But both of them have very high-pitched, girlish kind of qualities to their voices.
Yeah.
Whereas Kamala comes off as emphatic and strong.
Right.
And masculine, and I think that is an issue for Amy and for Kirsten, because it just won't work. It just won't work, and somebody ought to be in there, tutoring them on how better to use, their voices and their intonations, et cetera. So, maybe it's a small matter, but it's off-putting. Similarly, Elizabeth Warren, who I always find, I find her disingenuous a lot and an overzealous kind of delivery.
Yeah.
She's really in your face. But that's better having the other.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And women candidates do have to think about that kind of thing, in this new world where women are getting, to the table finally. What do we have, 4 of them in the contest?
Yeah.
How delicious is that? But compare that to Bill de Blasio opening up a mouth. Oh, God.
Right. Well,
and let's go short on that because, we're running out of time.
Yeah. Well, New York politics is going to select for, aggressive candidates. And, it's going to give you training in how to get in people's face. And he clearly had that ability and was able to get a pop. We'll see if it's got any effect.
Right. The other one who, John Delaney, I thought didn't get a fair shake. I thought he was very smart, in his what he had to say.
Yeah.
But he has an issue too. Somebody needs to put a pair of dark black glasses on John Delaney.
Yeah, something.
Right? Because his face doesn't work for camera.
A fedora. I don't know.
I don't know, but he's not a dumb man.
No. I've spent time with him, written about him, and he's not.
He just doesn't have that telegenic thing going, and that's my thoughts on him. Julián Castro, I thought he was overrated the other night too. I mean, but hey, that's what makes horse races. And you liked him. You thought he had kind of popped a little.
No, I didn't like him. I just thought he popped a bit. His gambit with Beto was probably a smart move.
Right.
Now, what about Bernie, though?
Bernie who?
Yeah, right.
That's it. That's all you got to say. Bernie who? The story is he didn't prep, number one.
Yeah.
For some reason, he's yesterday's news. I don't. How did he allow that to happen? But he did. And whether it's because Elizabeth Warren's taking some of his vote away is only possible because he allowed himself to somehow become yesterday's news. But, there's a backlash, maybe because all that he did to Hillary is at work here and at play here. And people are just like, stop it. Or maybe it's socialism isn't going to work.
Yeah, and he also didn't engage in a way that was going to be productive. He didn't, he didn't turn to Biden. He didn't engage with anybody in a way that was there. It was kind of like an old man talking to himself.
Oh, God. Well, that gets us to that ageism thing that's making me really nuts.
No. I'm
kidding. But you know what I'm saying.
I thought he actually looked very good and spry and stuff. But, he just didn't.
Yeah. You said
it's almost like he wasn't at a debate. He was just kind of talking.
He wasn't present. Bernie who?
Yeah.
Tim Ryan.
Yeah, right.
Jay Inslee.
Yeah,
Yeah, like goodbye. It's been swell, guys. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
You've got your purpose.
Look,
Inslee could be the head of the new EA or something. Or yeah. Okay, whatever. They just no, they don't do it. They don't do it. So let's go on to a couple of the others. I'd be curious. There's Michael Bennet.
Well, he's a smart guy, and he's interestingly positioned himself, but he didn't really pop at all. He stumbled over his words at different times, and he has a sort of
odd voice.
I'm not sure I need to hear about his prostate. I just don't,
Oh, my God. Really, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
yeah.
and can, wait, before we get to, how about John Hickenlooper?
Yeah, I don't think he really, did.
It's another who.
Yeah, that's just another,
Who?
Yeah, exactly.
Who are you, an owl? And then our very favorite Eric Swalwell.
Well, that was, yeah, I'd have to say it was kind of, I found it the most grating performance. Just, I mean, his corny line about a new generation and his sort of overly made up look.
God, that orange tie.
I mean, there's just the whole thing was just not, and his little attempt to sort of take out Buttigieg. It was
sad.
It was grating, and he kind of diminished himself. One thing you have to keep an eye on if you're one of these candidates is how are you going to be enhanced by this process. You're probably not going to win, so you're going to come out of this thing better than you went in. And Swalwell's an example of someone who's, the opposite. He had a moderately okay reputation as a congressman and a cable regular, and now he's, I think, kind of hurting his overall shtick.
Well, here's something that's you may know the answer to this better than I, but the Democratic Party puts out people to do its bidding on the cable shows, right?
Yeah.
And they're generally the same people over and again. Over and over, it's the same bodies that show up. Just kind of like Lindsey Graham is always out there for the Republicans.
Sure.
Swalwell is one of those people. He's on all the time, constantly.
Yeah.
So who does that? Is that his PR people doing that for him?
Yeah.
Getting him booked, or is that the Democratic Party? Because the Democratic... Go ahead. Yeah,
no, the party does not really select them. I mean, the bookers go to who they like to go to, and, the candidates offer themselves up, and they sort of become like, occasional guest stars on a TV series.
And I think it's a big mistake, and it's an underutilized thing that the parties, be they the Democrats or the Republicans for that matter, don't get involved in that and put out specific people in a better way, and multiple people, so it's not always the same voices, that we can get a better picture of what the hell is really going on. I really think that's something that cable ought to start thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a booker, I wouldn't keep calling Eric Swalwell.
No, and that's what I said. He's got whoever's doing his PR for him is doing a hell of a job in getting him out there. Enough for him to be deluded. He should run for president. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. But again, as you said, did he do himself any favors, because he's not ready for prime time, and it was clear the other night. So, there we go. Listen, I want to talk about a couple of other things that are while the Democrats were debating. Two decisions came down from the Supreme Court. The first was on gerrymandering, which is pretty funny considering all the conversation about blacks. And the second was on the census, considering what was the conversation. Talk to us about the gerrymandering in light of all of this. This really is like, what the hell?
Well, it's a big decision because the courts, there was a lot of anticipation when they said they'd hear cases on this about whether partisan gerrymandering can go too far and thus be unconstitutional, depriving citizens of their, votes effectively. And in the end, the court gave a big victory to the gerrymanderers by saying, courts shouldn't get involved in this. It is what it is. How can we possibly judge? Which is, I think wrong. They judge on things all the time.
But the effect of that judgment is massive to people of color.
I think it's a big green light for gerrymandering, and it's very hard to undo the effects of gerrymandering because whoever the party is in control that's doing it really, it's very hard to undo their advantage. And because over the years, mapping techniques and other things have made it much easier to, draw a map where, the two parties may be at equal strength in the population, but as in Wisconsin, you can cut it in a way that it goes 10-3.
Right.
by packing the Democrats into one place. So I think it was an unfortunate decision. I think it's going to have a big long-term impact. I think it's hard to undo the effects of it. So that was a big deal.
And the census thing was weird. And now Trump is saying we're not going to do the census. He doesn't have a choice in that. It's in the Constitution.
Yeah, it's rather explicitly in the Constitution. And look, I think they kicked it to the lower courts. I don't think that means they're going to vote against Trump in the end. But, they did. There's a lot of wariness of Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross's
Thank God.
Dubious explanation for why they were asking the citizenship question. And so, I think that was another case where they kind of surprised liberal critics of the court who didn't think that they would turn down the administration's bid.
This court is proving to be quite interesting. Roberts was Matt Schlapp wants him impeached.
Yes.
I always say,
all convinced.
Slap that Matt Schlapp. I mean, he's so off the wall.
Roberts. Yeah,
he really is just perfect for the Republican Party these days. What can I tell you? The other thing that I want to talk to is Pelosi apparently, and I'm going to use the word in quotes, caved and agreed to pass the Senate border funding bill after McConnell defeated the House version. I must say, Matthew, Ms. Pelosi is not up to her game of late. Now, I understand she got herself cornered here. She's cornered on impeachment, too. She just cornered. You might disagree. Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't do what the liberals and the caucus wanted, which was to keep fighting the Republicans' version of a border immigration, funding bill. And she caved. I think eventually, I don't know how she could have prevailed in the end, but look, she brought this thing to a head, and look, she's got a little rebellion going on. No question on the impeachment, on this.
She's not with the party. Hello? She's not.
Yeah.
Because behind the scenes, it's my understanding, I think we're at 80 who have come out publicly to say they're for impeachment.
Yeah.
But it's my understanding that behind the scenes there are many, 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 many more. And that the 80 actually are people of quite strong. They're the people who are on all the committees, all the chairmen and their underlings, who are seeing the data, are the ones pro impeachment. I find that extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's where the energy is, and more House members are going to come out for impeachment. There's no question it's going that way instead of the other way. So, she's got to figure out how to manage this. And I think you're right. She is out of step.
She's definitely out of step. While we were sleeping, Mr. Trump does Japan.
Yeah.
And Mr. Putin. Now listen to me. Did you see that footage this morning of him leaning over and telling Putin jokingly, so to speak?
Yeah, I've read about it.
Not to interfere in the election?
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
I mean, oh my God. And then he actually says on journalists, it's fake news. They don't do that in Russia. They don't have the problem in Russia. But Russia folks, they just kill us. It's like,
yeah, it's an amazingly ugly performance, and very infuriating and dispiriting at the same time.
And he'll get away with it, darling. He gets away with it all. He can say anything he wants to say, do anything he wants to do.
Yeah, and the collapse of sort of the Lindsey Grahams and others in the party to just accommodate this bullshit, kind of amazing.
I'm not going to blame them. I'm going to blame the Democrats. They say it because at the end of the day, that's who's letting him get away with it, and that's my other argument with Miss Pelosi. I mean, when this was going down, there's no reason in the world, particularly on the thing, she could have taken that vote on the border funding and gone in front of the cameras and explained why she let it go, and that who the Democratic Party is we will not allow children to be caged and treated like animals. So the messaging on the Democratic Party's part is more at fault here than the idiot who knows he can get away with it because there's no good messaging on the side of the Democratic Party. And this is indicative, my friend, of what's going to happen in this race, for who becomes the presidential candidate for the Democrats. There is no good messaging. Zero. It's bad. And if this is how it is now, it's only going to get worse. Why didn't she go before the cameras and really, really look at Trump in the eye through the camera lens and said, look, we're not going, this is unacceptable?
I agree.
Yeah, it's problematic.
But I don't think her hesitance is going to affect Warren or Harris or whoever the nominee is. They're going to go full bore.
Well, I get that, except to say that she's the one who has control. There still only be candidates. She's in control, and she could play different. And if she plays it differently, listen to me, Matt, she can also control the election process, and she can help take Trump out.
Yes, ideally, she would be using her power to do that.
Right, and she's not doing that, and so that's and that's how it's been all along. She's just kind of let it go and go and go. So Nancy Pelosi, I we all need to look at that and say she's not being effective. She's Trump's best friend right now. She's his BFF. She's not going to impeach him. She lets him get away with whatever it is he wants to say. She lets McConnell away with whatever he wants to do. And she just kind of,
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying.
We need a fighter. We don't have a fighter. Okay. So 2 things. Endgame. Did the last 2 days affect the Democratic race?
We'll see in the polls. I think it's going to help Harris raise more money. I think it's going to give Booker a little more spring. Yeah, sure, it has an effect. I think it's going to get Biden worrying. But it's, a long road. This is the first step. A lot more debates. We'll see.
Yeah. It does change things a little. But tomorrow, something else could change things a lot. That's the way this whole game is going to go for the next many, 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 many months.
Yes.
And we leave you with this. We have something to look forward to. Bob Mueller's coming to...
It's very exciting.
Okay. You think he's going to make it a difference?
No.
Me
I
either.
think it's going to be bad for the Dems, actually, because he's just going to... Well, he'll spar with the Republicans because all those nut jobs are like, aren't you trying to lead a coup d'etat against the president? So they'll embarrass themselves, but the Dems are not going to get him to say anything hot. He's just going to,
I think the Dems are making the same mistake they did on the first, on the Mueller report.
Yeah, I think they're going to be very...
They're overplaying it.
Measured.
Yeah, they're overplaying it. They're building people's hopes when they should be destroying them, and so that the game of expectations is being played all wrong again by Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah,
geez.
I mean,
I'm nasty on Nancy tonight, aren't I?
You're
today.
tough. You're tough.
I'm tough. So, anything that I left undone that you wanted to talk to me about before we say ta-ta?
Ta-ta. No, I think we covered a lot of ground, and we'll see you next time.
It's always swell.
Always swell.
It's always swalwell.
It's always swalwell.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.